It has been a long journey for Destiny over the last decade. That's right, Destiny turns 10 years old in September. It's a journey that spanned 2 console generations and 3 publishers, first Activision, then Bungie itself, and now Sony. Hell, I met my wife, got married, and had 2 kids since I started my journey as a Guardian. The point is, it's been a hell of a ride for the Destiny faithful, and this finale of the Light and Darkness saga has a lot riding on it for players who followed this game since the beginning. And Bungie wants to surprise and delight their fans with something special for the end of the Light and Darkness saga. The team invited us to play a handful of story missions, dive into Prismatic, try the new exotic class item, test out the new subclass, play with a handful of new exotics, and even let me get destroyed in PvP. But here's PvP kills, Fallout, and data were nice enough to let me get during the preview. Thanks guys. All of that crammed into 2 days was a lot, but I'm sure there's one question that is on your mind. Did they pull it off? Did the final shape wind up being an impactful send-off for the story we started all those years ago? Well, I'm not sure yet. The story we did get to experience was different. The entire premise and aesthetic the Witness has built with the Pale Heart is about perception and memory, and my interpretation of the story is that it seems to focus on one core tenet: grief. How do you deal with loss? How do you deal with the complex emotions of losing someone or something you love? To what lengths will you go to prevent it from happening again? It's an interesting motif that plays out with the weird and wild interpretation the Witness has of the locations we've seen before, like the highway where we were first brought into this world, but it's held up by creepy hands that stretch out from beneath it, or the Destiny 1 tower, which is all but abandoned and covered in green growth. These interpretations are both endearing and off-putting at the same time. You'll remember the time you spent there if you're a longtime Destiny player, but something about all of it just doesn't feel right. It's almost like you're experiencing someone's happy dream in one section.
It's not what I expected the heart of the traveler would be like, but it's beautiful.
And their nightmare in the next. And to preface this part, I didn't play the entire story, but I did play a very large chunk of the campaign, stopping just short of the 7th finale mission. And what I did see left me feeling a bit mixed from a storytelling perspective. The story is much better than Lightfall in terms of composition, but pacing in terms of gameplay feels off. It also doesn't even attempt to tie together any of the lingering story threads that are still there years later. Eris Morn didn't make an appearance at any point, which felt odd given the important role she played in getting us to this point. The main villain of Beyond Light, Aramis, just kind of fizzled out after breaking free of the stasis prison she was in.
And then nothing. I mean, nothing.
Meanwhile, we've learnt to completely remove the line between darkness and light and unlock a whole new subclass in the form of Prismatic.
The line between light and dark it's gone. It's gone.
And these are all things that felt like they would have come to a head in this final battle, as each of the pieces played a part in getting us here. Instead, it's solely focused on a few key players: the Queen, Crow, Cade, Ikora, Zavala, and our Guardian. And because this is the finale, I had hoped for a bit more than another romp with the Vanguard when there are so many pawns left on the playing field. But to be fair, all of that could be covered in the episodes or post-campaign content we didn't get to play, so I can't hold that against them too much, while there are still several pieces of the puzzle left in the box in the form of exotic quests and follow-up missions post-campaign. What I can be critical of, however, is the implementation of puzzles that repeatedly grind your gameplay to a dead halt. That feeling of being grinded to a dead halt rears its head again with Transcendence, because if you're not using the Prismatic subclass and instead want to try out one of your new supers, you're going to be stopped in your tracks. See, certain enemies require having a barrier removed with Transcendence during gameplay. So if you choose the other super, the only way to become Transcendent during the campaign is to backtrack and stand in a pool while you wait for your Transcendence to power up. Or take cover while the bad guys you can't damage shoot at you as you cower in fear waiting for a pool to power you up so you can simply get to the next story beat. The new supers with the Prismatic subclass are unlocked later in the campaign though. And there are other puzzles we got to experience that are similar to what I'm describing here. Puzzles that aren't particularly difficult, but require completing a menial task to lower a barrier that's halting your progress. You'll often be standing in an empty room, hunting down a node, or having to run from one end of the map to another to get a material you need simply to get to the next encounter. There were some compelling puzzles later on that involved dispelling an aura, which is a bit more involved, and I did appreciate the fact that they actually made me think a bit.
It seems clear they really want you to use Prismatic,
Even if it's not as powerful as I had hoped, especially as the starting Prismatic abilities on the Hunter, namely the multi-shot Golden Gun and Silence and Squall Stasis ability, aren't my favorite. Simply put, the majority of puzzles felt like either a missed opportunity at best or an annoyance at worst. Complaints aside, one thing the team got right was including fragment drops as part of your campaign progress. I was so thankful to see these, as it meant no more boring material farms to unlock all your Guardian's abilities and get build crafting. Instead, it appears you'll be able to acquire all you need from simply playing the game. And that's a small example of a quality of life change Bungie made. An even bigger one was the Pale Heart Patrol area that's filled with entirely new public events, interesting patrols with new mechanics, new lost sectors, and an objective called Overthrow. As you clear the various objectives scattered about in the Pale Heart Patrol zones, you'll be leveling up Overthrow to the max rank of 3. Once at level 3, a unique encounter will start that's different depending on the area you're in. In the landing, I fought a witch devoted to Savathun. Would spawn protection that you would need to dispel in between each damage phase. The Blooming had me fight Vexillos, taken by the Witness, who needed to have its shield dispelled by standing in pools that gave you a volatile Fetor buff, and once you had this, you needed to detonate it on the boss to take down its shield. And on the Impasse landing zone, I fought Runa, Subjugator of Chasms, who had mechanics somewhat similar to those found in the Volk encounter from the Vowed Disciple raid, in that it would require you to collect Dread Resonance to make Runa vulnerable again. Each of these were very fun, and I can't wait to see the pandemonium that these areas will turn into the first few weeks after Final Shape launches. The map feels huge, and every single public event I played was completely new. This was a huge highlight for me and a much needed refresh to the landing zones in Destiny 2. There are even feathers to collect, which is just a perfect touch given the teaser we got between Crow and Cade that leads to this finale. These all are parts of the new Pathfinder reward system that will have you complete various objectives at your own pace to unlock coveted items at the end of the tree. Don't like one landing area? Take on another boss. In practice, I like this, and just doing the areas passively, I found that I unlocked this little bonus in the background. I do like that you'll be able to take the path of your choosing or branch off should you desire a new path if you get a bit sick of grinding Gambit or battling in the Crucible. And it seems like different modes will have their own version of Pathfinder. For example, Vanguard Activities had one, and I also had one for doing objectives across the Pale Heart. Finally, the gear. I wish I could tell you the new exotic class item was particularly compelling, but looking at the combinations and having fiddled with Prismatic, I admit feeling a little bit underwhelmed with both systems. It feels like the exotic class item exists simply to buff Prismatic, which currently feels a bit weak. Granted, some meta build will emerge after launch, I'm sure, but as it stands, I'm not seeing a path that makes it really shine. For example, I made a really powerful Strand build that utilized the Hunter's Void Tether super, but even with a God Rule drop, I don't see how the class item buffs it more than just running a normal Strand would. Strand is already very powerful, as are the core subclasses, and I wasn't getting that oomph or wow factor from Prismatic just yet. Well, the power-up animations are cool when you go Transcendent, I'll give it that. What I did like was the new supers, however. Rolling a Hunter, I was having a blast teleporting around with the new Storm's Edge super. Once cast, your Electrified Dagger will fly across the screen and you'll zip to its location. Again, as a terrible PvP player, this was an incredibly powerful tool that I could see high-level players taking advantage of in some fun ways. And while I didn't play with the Titan, the Twilight Arsenal Axe super also looks really intriguing because you spawn 3 Void Axes that can be picked up by other players and used as a weapon. Sorry, Dado. The Warlock sees the return of Song of Flame, which gives the Warlock a solar soul that will seek out and destroy opponents in your path. None of these seem like they'll be boss DPS supers, but for clearing lower rank foes and in PvP, I do think we'll see some interesting usage of them. And on the gear front, there are a plethora of new exotics to try out. I mainly played with the Hunter Leg exotic Balance of Power. These boots give your Threaded Spectre increased duration and durability, but damaging it releases more Threadlings, and when you're near your Spectre, you'll remain hidden from radar. The Gifted Conviction chestplate makes you spawn a wave of orb arcs that seek out nearby opponents, and I've got to be honest, it's probably the coolest looking out of all that I tried. On the Titan side of things, I took a peek at Wishful Ignorance, which has an insanely detailed design of small moving levers that just looks neat. It powers up to give you an additional Frenzy Blade charge and make both Frenzy Blade and Flechette Storm increase their damage with each strike. Well, pulses from your Banner of War return melee energy based on the number of allies healed. This one seems like it does a lot and could be really good in the game. Hazardous Propulsion adds rockets to your class ability as you get primary kills, which is just wacky to think about. And Warlocks, well, I forgot to take a peek for you, but we know that the chest plate will give you additional needles, causing suspension, and there's likely a lot more beyond all of this that I didn't cover in this preview, like the new Warlock Helmet exotic that Bungie's been teasing. On the weapons front, we got to toy around with a few returning firearms and a few new ones. It was a mixed bag, which is to be expected, but there was one standout for me in the form of Still Hunt. Still Hunt is a sniper that charges up with each precision hit and can then be activated by holding down R to give you 3 golden gun shots. I can't tell just yet, but this seems like it's broken, especially when comparing what an actual golden gun does for damage while on the Prismatic Subclass versus this thing. It seems like a good combo to me. Gavostov makes a return, and it seems pretty strong as bullets will ricochet every 7th bullet that is fired from the weapon, dealing additional damage and ricocheting to nearby targets. Red Death Reformed was the Battle Pass exotic, and after giving it a try, it certainly felt like Red Death, healing on kills and giving a faster reload time. And finally, Microcosm is a bit of an interesting one that I didn't know how to feel about, but it claims to deal massive bonus damage to shields. I'm not quite sure yet about the use case for this, but I'll be interested to learn more. There were also a handful of legendary weapons that had a card theme to them, which felt mostly underwhelming with the exception of 1 or 2 standouts. There was one notable sidearm named the Call, which fired rockets and was really powerful when being used in battle. It was awesome, but the rest felt a bit too similar to other weapons we've seen before. Bold Endings has a hard-hitting 2-round burst, which is interesting for a hand cannon but didn't really gel for me. Even the heavy machine gun Pro Memoria that I used in most of my footage was somewhat similar to my Marcato 45 with a hatchling perk. In the weapon department, my standouts were easily Silent Hunt Sniper for style alone, and the Wishful Ignorance Titan exotic arms for design and potential, but otherwise, time will tell how these new introductions shake out in the loot pool. And that's the sentiment I largely left my preview feeling, unsure about how this will all play out. There were some really great highlights in the new patrol area and a ton of new information to parse during my 2-day preview session. But I'm left worried it's not going to come together in the way that fulfills fans. Gameplay-wise, there's going to be plenty to dive into for players after the campaign. But will the campaign be a hit for fans? Could it ever be a hit for fans? We're talking about 10 years of build-up to this moment, a ton of story threads to tie up, a ton of pressure on Bungie to nail it. I'll be there with you to see how it all plays out. For more on Destiny, be sure to check out our build guide, and for more on all things gaming, keep it right here on IGN.